So on part 1 of our UFO disclosure series, we spoke about the different shapes that people had been seeing in the sky as far as military personnel and civilians. And so we went into the different things as far as cubical, conical, and spherical flying objects. And so there are also other shapes such as prisms. And ironically enough, of course, there is an entire organization. So the organization itself is called prisms. A prism is a transparent optical element, usually has flat surfaces, and is able to reflect lights. And that also goes back to the shape and some of the abilities of exotic objects. And so there's also a department known as the Prism Center. And it is a department of energy software innovation. And it basically supports the development of open source computational tools and repository. But what will stick out to you, interestingly enough, a software innovation center. Now keep that in mind, software. PRISMS is also short for Predictive Integrated Structural Materials Science. Now, on part 1 of our UFO series, we spoke about virtual volume and how it relates to the Earth. And a virtual volume is also in relation to computers, software, and hardware. And it is a storage paradigm that visualizes storage arrays. And that takes us back to those dangerous gamma rays that we spoke about on part 1. So keep that in mind along with virtual volume. And pretty much for the system to be able to manage a greater amount of storage in virtualized environments. A system at rest using virtual volume as a means of storage is able to better control and automate its processes. Now, the virtual volume pertaining to the Earth would be how much space could it really hold? So, speaking technologically, looking at the blue sky, you could say that that is some sort of covering or background. Very similar and eerily similar to lead volume walls, LED, as far as all of the graphics that is needed in a technical sense. The sun, the moon, the stars, the clouds, the blue sky above us, and even water itself can hold storage. So going back to UAPs and UFOs, looking at them today in a technical sense, we can also relate them to an application object within a computer. And an application object is an entity within an application that users interact with by browsing, searching, modifying, and even storing. Speaking of users, we will pertain that to us humans throughout this video. And so speaking of computers, of course, we all are aware of what a engine is, especially like a search engine like Google or AOL. And you can also look at the Earth as being an engine, sort of like a mechanical device, which was a word derived from the 1300s. And it is meticulously built in a manner of construction and very much so in line with a computer or a server. High levels of gold and silver and the same identical components that are used in computers. And not to mention, most of our optics are underwater. Certain materials and metals, they may be able to modify it, move it around, whatever they want. But in a general sense, all of the Earth's gold and metals, whether you do whatever you want to do with them, they're still here existing on an energetic level within our dimension. And in relation to storage space, as in the space above us, they have said, NASA and different organizations, that there are diamonds and crystals and different metals on other alleged planets. It's no different from the server that we are speaking about on Earth today. As above, so below. Space may only be virtual storage space and is an exact replica of our dimension and its lands, and may in fact hold no real means as for physical exploration and may be better traveled on a 2D plane. Which, of course, is sort of an issue because the ocean is so large that allegedly one whole side of the world is nothing but waters, and it's some of the most volatile waters, such as in the Southern Ocean. Now, going back to the word engine, such as a search engine like Google or AOL, the word engine also relates to the word gene, taking us back to part 1 about genes and genealogy, and it also means to give birth or beget. So, of course, in the Bible, the word beget means to procreate or generate, and keep generate in mind. It also appears in the King James Version of the Bible 259 times. So, that is something you definitely want to read into. And it pretty much starts in Genesis chapter 4, verse 18, and then in John chapter 5, verse 1. 1 John. Making it very relevant to the UAP's origin story, as well as our creation. But we are also going to get into the technical sense of what they are, as though still aligning with those things previously stated, such as exotic particles or gods, but what their actual positions are. And another thing that is very interesting about the word beget, it was also used in the Old Testament, and it pretty much lists all of the generations. And me, when reading the Bible, I always used to struggle through that part for some reason, because it was so many families that begetted. It was so many people that was begetted, so many sons and things of that nature, and daughters. But it also repeats the same information, and it pretty much shows how people live and die, and looking at it in a sense of generations at least 9 times within the Bible. So when people say that cats have 9 lives, we may in fact be those cats that they are referring to. And although we don't remember our previous lives, we do remember certain aspects or feelings or gestures or even slight flashbacks. So some people remember more than others, but it's giving towards that thought of people living a past life, and when we have deja vu. So basically it is a repeating cycle of life. So going back to virtual volume, the volume formula can be used to calculate the amount of space a 3D object occupies. Yes, our world is 3D, but we live on a 2D level. So as I spoke about before on part 1 of this series regarding virtual volume, let's look at virtual volume in relation to a container. And keep in mind, when we speak of container, we are speaking of a container as it applies to the technological world of a computer, a server, and software. And we're also speaking of it as it pertains to our natural world, which some people believe that we are being contained by ice. And of course, ice has crystal-like particles and properties in similarity to a diamond or a crystal. But we'll go into that at another time. Keeping in mind that we live on a 2D level in a 3D world, UAPs in similarity to gods or angels do not need to be within our dimension to control our dimension. As I mentioned before on part 1, they are multi-dimensional beings. Look at the earth as being hyper-advanced technology, which requires storage or virtual volume to contain its software and files. And imagine the magnitude of necessary storage space as it relates to graphics, such as the blue sky, the clouds, the stars, rainbows, lightning, the sun, the moon. And keep in mind, like I stated before, that we are at rest, and everything around us, whether at rest or not, exerts energy, radiation, and or vibrations. But because UAPs are multidimensional and their godlike particle come from an external outlet, so does the system that holds the replica of our world or runs our worldly laws. And they are tasked to govern these policies. So again, going back to that water hole storage, there's also something known as water memory, and it is the purported ability of water to retain a memory of substances previously dissolved in it, even after an arbitrary number of serial dilutions, meaning that our bodies of waters and oceans have potentially been programmed with an ancient codec, which is relevant to the resonance that we spoke about on part 1 pertaining to the tides, which instantaneously gives the UAPs the ability to encode as well as decode digital data streams that transmits as a sequence of signals. Highly intelligent automation, maritime automation to be exact. So, in short, UAPs are the overseers of the virtual system, which again exists outside of our dimension, and we are merely living within a container, or i.e. an application, much like the apps on your device. And as crazy as that sounds, the creator of the program built in automated policy-based laws that the application or its users can arbitrarily, by law, not go against, which takes us back to, as I stated on part 1 of this series, why we may be seeing an uptick of said UAPs due to the increase of military equipment, signals, and certain wavelengths. One in particular being war in war machines. So the word brigade and engine can also relate to cleverness, war machines, deceit, and ingenium, meaning we were given certain abilities or commands at birth that are a part of the basis of our development, such as being able to speak. The word engine also relates to the word brigade, which again is a religious term, and brigade means again to generate or procreate, which can give way to a master developer, a creator, or a god who tasks and governs the UAPs as well as the humans. And speaking both militarily and technologically, we have a military, every country. You can look at the UAPs as being Earth's very own kernels. And when you speak of this on a technological level, such as virtual kernels, and kernels such as KERNELS in comparison to COLONELS, and they are virtual kernels in both a technical sense and in a military sense. And in a technical sense, the kernel is the core. They are members of a regime, and they have been automatically tasked to take action when any policy-based laws are being disregarded. And because certain actions can and will cause mass destruction in which will be multiplied in amplitude, such as we spoke about previously on part 1, due to the adverse effects such as war and war machines. That goes against the policy to a certain degree, because now we are living in a more technologically advanced world. And of course that could be used for good in certain ways, but when it's used in other ways, we end up having congressional meetings and meetings of the armed security services. The irony of it all. Well, this video was created by Tracy Armstrong, and you can check out part 1 in the comments, and be sure to, as I always say, do your own research, and last but not least, stay woke.